Would you believe me if I told you that a New York millionaire had to pretend to be poor to discover the true meaning of love? It sounds like a movie script, but this is a story that will challenge everything you think you know about wealth, appearances, and happiness. Get ready, because what began as a disguise turned into a revelation, powerful enough to shock even high society. And the most surprising part? All of this happened because of a 5-year-old boy and his sincere desire to have a real family. Do you want to know how an entire empire almost collapsed because of a secret? And how love managed to turn the game around? Then subscribe to the channel now, turn on notifications, and dive with me into this emotional story. William Harris, a renowned businessman in New York, had everything many people dreamed of achieving: wealth, prestige, and recognition. However, since the tragic car accident that took his wife's life, his world had completely changed. What was once a routine shared with family had turned into silent days inside a luxurious yet empty home. His son, Ethan Harris, only 5 years old, was his greatest motivation to keep moving forward. With every gesture of the child, William noticed the absence of a maternal figure. The boy carried a special brightness in his eyes, but over time that light seemed to fade. It was clear that he needed more than his father's care. He longed for affection, warmth, and the presence of someone who could fill his mother's place. Women often appeared in his life, drawn by his status and fortune. They all seemed interested, but not in who William truly was, nor in little Ethan. What they sought was in his wealth, his last name, and the power surrounding his family. This realization deeply hurt William, as it exposed how difficult it was to find someone genuine. Still, he tried his best to provide Ethan with everything possible. Private tutors, nannies, and even child behavior specialists were hired, yet nothing seemed enough. No matter how qualified the support around them was, nothing could replace a mother's love. William saw in every detail the fragility of Ethan's childhood and feared that it would shape the boy's future. As time passed, loneliness became increasingly evident. Even surrounded by people at social events, William felt isolated. Smiles and conversations were nothing but formalities, incapable of filling the emptiness he carried. The house, once full of life, had turned into a space of memories and silence. The nights were the hardest. When Ethan fell asleep, William found himself drowning in memories of the past and questions about the future. He wondered if he would ever be able to give his son the feeling of a family again. The weight of responsibility was heavy, yet his determination was stronger. Amidst it all, Ethan began asking questions that revealed his longing. He wondered why his mother wasn't there like the other children's mothers, and William, without answers, felt broken. Those innocent words echoed inside him as a constant reminder of the absence they both endured. It was in this landscape of pain and reflection that a new thought began to emerge in his mind. A different, daring plan that could change the course of their lives. An idea born from the need to protect his son, but also from the desire to find someone who would love Ethan for who he was, not for what he represented. Tired of being the target of looks interested only in his fortune, William Harris began to devise a plan that seemed improbable for someone in his position. He decided to strip away all the symbols of status that surrounded him: the expensive suits, the luxury cars, and even the imposing posture of a businessman. His idea was simple yet risky: to live as an ordinary man. The decision did not come from impulse, but from sleepless nights spent reflecting on his son's future. He longed for a maternal presence that was genuine, someone who would not look at the Harris name, but rather at Ethan and the life they could build together. For that, he needed to hide his identity as a millionaire and blend into the daily lives of simple people. William began preparing for the transformation. He put away the Swiss watches, replaced tailored suits with worn shirts and plain trousers. Instead of polished leather shoes, he wore scuffed boots, the kind of footwear of a laborer. The reflection in the mirror no longer showed the magnate of New York, but an anonymous man, ready to face the world without the masks of wealth. To sustain the disguise, he created a new version of himself. He would introduce himself as a delivery truck driver, a simple man, hardworking, devoted to his son. Every detail was carefully planned. Stories of everyday life, explanations for the absence of luxury, even the way he spoke would need to change. It was like playing the most important role of his life. Ethan, still young, did not fully understand the plan, but William prepared him gently. He told the boy they would live more simply for a while, like a secret adventure between father and son. To the child, the idea sounded like an exciting game, without realizing that this disguise would change the course of their lives forever. With each step, William realized the magnitude of the challenge. Leaving behind the security of his fortune was risky, but necessary. He knew that only in this way could he discover who would truly see value in him as a man, and, above all, who would be capable of loving Ethan without expecting anything in return. This mission became clearer in his heart every day. While the world saw him as a distant millionaire, William immersed himself in his new persona. His days were now guided by simple gestures, greeting strangers on the street, conversing with common workers, riding public transportation. Every detail became part of a routine that was completely new to someone who had always lived surrounded by privilege. And so, in the silence of his own choices, William began a journey that would change not only his story, but also Ethan's. He did not yet know how or when he would find the woman he sought, but he was certain of one thing: this daring plan would lead him to truths he had never imagined facing. Grace Miller was a young woman with a generous heart, but life had not been easy for her. She worked as a maid in different places to support her sick mother, carrying on her shoulders responsibilities that most people her age never knew. Her days began early and ended late, always among brooms, buckets, and the hope of better days. Despite the hardships, she never stopped smiling. In search of stability, Grace managed to get a new job at a preschool. The simple environment, full of cheerful voices and colorful drawings on the walls, made her work feel lighter. There, while cleaning hallways and organizing classrooms, she found small moments of peace. It was as if, amid the chaos of her life, that place offered her a breath of hope. One day, as she passed by the schoolyard, Grace noticed a boy sitting alone on a swing. His eyes, full of sadness, contrasted with the energy of the other children running and laughing around him. The boy was Ethan Harris, who seemed distant, as if he carried a weight far too heavy for his young age. Without hesitation, Grace approached. In a gentle tone, she asked if he wanted company, and Ethan's eyes lit up subtly. The simple conversation filled with kindness transformed that moment. In just a few minutes, the boy's sadness gave way to a shy but sincere smile, something few people were able to bring out of him. William, watching everything from a distance in his disguise as a common worker, was deeply moved. He had tried countless ways to cheer his son, but seeing Ethan smile so spontaneously in front of a stranger touched him profoundly. It was as if Grace held an invisible key to unlock the boy's heart. From that moment on, a silent bond began to form. Grace didn't know who the boy really was, nor who the man accompanying him might be. To her, he was simply a lonely child who needed attention, and it was precisely this natural sincerity that immediately won Ethan over. In the days that followed, every time Grace passed through the schoolyard, Ethan ran to her. He welcomed her with hugs and stories, showing a trust that didn't come easily. For William, this connection was a sign that perhaps finally, he had found someone capable of seeing beyond appearances. And so, in the simplicity of a school playground, destiny began quietly weaving its threads. Grace, unaware, was taking the first steps on a journey that would change her life, as well as William's and Ethan's. What seemed like a casual encounter was about to become part of a much greater story. William decided to approach Grace, still in his disguise as a common worker. He dressed as a delivery truck driver, with simple clothes and a humble appearance, leaving no trace of his true identity. When he met Grace for the first time outside the school, he tried to appear natural. To her, he seemed like nothing more than a simple man, but with kind eyes and an honest posture. The conversation began casually, with small remarks about the weather and the daily life of the city. Grace, used to dealing with people who often looked at her with indifference because of her condition, was surprised by his gentleness. William showed genuine interest in what she had to say, listening attentively, and that made her feel at ease. There was no rush, only a sincere exchange. Ethan, by his father's side, seemed thrilled with Grace's presence. The boy, who usually kept to himself, smiled as he walked alongside her. His trust was visible, as if he had already chosen her to hold a special place in his life. Grace, sensitive to this, offered him caring gestures and gentle words. William noticed every detail of this bond, deeply impressed. He who knew his son's pain better than anyone else saw in Grace an unexpected light. It was as if, In such a short time, she had managed to heal wounds he had tried to soothe for years. Still, he hid his true self, afraid of ruining that promising beginning. Grace, on the other hand, saw in him a simple man, hard-working and deeply devoted to his son. This vision stirred admiration, for it reminded her of her own daily struggle to care for her sick mother. There was empathy in every gesture, as though they both shared the same essence, carrying responsibilities greater than themselves. Their meetings soon became frequent. Through short walks, quick conversations, and casual moments, William and Grace grew closer. Nothing was forced. Everything unfolded naturally, and each encounter opened space for a deeper connection, built not on haste but on sincerity. Ethan, increasingly happy, reflected this change. The boy played, told stories, and laughed with her, something he had not done in a long time. For William, seeing his son smile again was the greatest gift, and for Grace, feeling part of the boy's life was like rediscovering a greater meaning in her own routine. Thus, the first meeting gave rise to a sequence of moments that would transform all their destinies. Without realizing it, a triangle of affection began to form, uniting the lonely father, the needy child, and the woman who had appeared almost by chance. But the future still held challenges that would test this new bond. As the bond between William, Grace, and Ethan grew stronger, glances and spiteful remarks began to appear. William's wealthy friends, unaware of his disguise, saw him alongside a simple maid. Accustomed to a circle of luxury and appearances, they could not hide their disdain. They mocked among themselves, calling her unfit, incapable of belonging in the world they lived in. William, still hidden under his false identity, pretended not to care, but each comment silently cut deep. Deep down, he knew that once the truth came out, the judgment would be even harsher. The weight of social pressure showed him that wealth did not buy true respect, only upheld fragile appearances. Even so, he did not distance himself from Grace. Meanwhile, Grace also faced criticism in her own environment. Co-workers whispered during their breaks, saying she would never escape poverty by being with a man who apparently had no future. The words were sharp, filled with disbelief and envy. Yet Grace chose silence, responding with dedication and dignity, just as she always had throughout her life. Ethan, too young to grasp the complexities of adults, only saw in Grace the presence that brought him joy again. For him, the opinions of others did not matter. He only wanted to keep close the woman who could make him smile. The purity of a child contrasted starkly with the cruelty of society, proving that sometimes the truth is simpler than it seems. With every meeting, the comments grew louder, like inevitable echoes. Yet both William and Grace learned to ignore them. He, long used to flatterers, valued even more her sincerity. She, used to living with little, saw in him a man devoted to his son regardless of the humble condition he pretended to have. This resilience drew even more attention. Where there had been mockery, curiosity began to rise. Some tried to figure out why William insisted on being with someone so far from his social standard. Grace, however, stood tall, showing that she was not intimidated by disapproving glances nor by words meant to belittle her. In moments like these, true bonds were tested. What could have torn them apart, in fact, brought them closer. William saw in Grace rare values: honesty, compassion, and the courage to face judgment without losing her essence. This only deepened his admiration for her, even as he hid who he truly was. Thus, amid prejudice and criticism, their relationship grew like a flame determined to stay lit despite the wind. Society could mock, but it could not extinguish the connection forming between them. Yet this path was already signaling even greater challenges that would soon come to light. William began to realize that his time with Grace was no longer just part of a plan. With every gesture she made, every sincere word, his heart opened to something he had not expected: love. The disguise which once seemed like a safe strategy now became a painful barrier. He found himself torn between protecting his identity and surrendering completely. The days were marked by simple encounters, yet full of meaning. Short walks, conversations in the playground, Ethan's laughter. All of this revealed a life William longed for, but did not have the courage to fully embrace. The fear of losing what he had built with Grace was stronger than his will to reveal the truth. At night, alone in his silent mansion, William reflected on the abyss between his two identities. The millionaire businessman was known and respected, yet empty. The simple man in disguise was loved by those who truly mattered. This duality consumed him, making it increasingly difficult to sustain the secret. Grace, meanwhile, continued to show her true essence. Even in the face of criticism, she remained firm, loyal, and compassionate. Her honesty stood in stark contrast to the lie William carried. He admired that strength, but at the same time felt unworthy for hiding such an important part of himself. It was a dilemma growing in silence. Ethan, innocent, was the bond uniting the two. The boy saw in Grace the figure he so desperately needed and, unknowingly, deepened his father's feelings even more. For William, every smile from his son was a reminder that he could not afford to lose everything. But the longer the deception lasted, the riskier it became. William's heart wavered between two fears: being rejected by Grace if he revealed who he truly was, or losing her by never revealing the truth. This inner battle devoured his peace. The same man who commanded companies and made million-dollar decisions trembled at the thought of losing an ordinary woman. Meanwhile, Grace believed she knew the man at her side. She saw simplicity, kindness, and dedication in him. Nothing led her to suspect that behind that disguise was one of New York's most powerful businessmen. This contrast between her trust and his secret only heightened the invisible tension surrounding them. And so, between glances, silences, and restrained gestures, William walked on fragile ground. He knew the moment of revelation was approaching, but he lacked the courage to face it. His inner conflict had become the greatest challenge of his life, paving the way for an unexpected turning point that would change everything. Everything seemed under control until an emergency completely changed the course of the story. Ethan suddenly fell ill, showing symptoms that required immediate medical attention. William, consumed by desperation, knew he could not take him to a common hospital without exposing his true identity. His son's life came before any disguise. In his rush to guarantee the best care, William brought Ethan to one of his own private clinics. The luxurious hallways, the trusted team of doctors, and the advanced resources revealed inevitably who he truly was. When Grace arrived and saw that scene, she could hardly believe her eyes. The image of the simple man, a delivery worker, crumbled before her. William, now dressed in the authority of a man who commanded an empire, made it clear he had never been who he claimed to be. Grace froze, overwhelmed by a mix of shock, disappointment, and disbelief. The pieces of the puzzle fell painfully into place. While Ethan received treatment with every available resource, William tried to explain the situation. He spoke urgently, justifying that his disguise had never been a game but a form of protection. Yet each word seemed small against the wound caused by his deception. The trust that had just begun to grow now stood on the edge of collapse. Grace could not hide her hurt. She felt used, deceived, as if every moment she had shared with him was nothing but part of a performance. Questions stormed her mind. Had she been chosen as just another test? Had there been sincerity in his glances, his gestures, his words? William, shaken, feared losing not only Grace's trust but also the bond she had created with Ethan. The boy, innocent, did not grasp the gravity of what was happening but sensed the tension in the air. For him, the only concern was to get better and keep Grace close, as he already saw her as an essential part of his life. At that moment, the distance between William and Grace seemed greater than ever. He was a millionaire man with hidden secrets, and she was a simple woman who had always valued honesty. The contrast between their realities was now undeniable, and her silence spoke louder than any words. The unexpected revelation turned what had been a story of connection into an abyss of uncertainty. The future of their relationship hung in the balance, and the weight of the truth now exposed left William facing his greatest trial, proving that, beyond fortune and masks, his love for Grace and Ethan was real. William could not bear the distance that had grown between him and Grace after the revelation. He tried in every way to explain that his disguise had never been meant to toy with her feelings. He spoke sincerely, saying he only wanted to protect Ethan from opportunistic women. Yet his words sounded like excuses in the face of the wound still open. Grace, her heart divided, withdrew to reflect. The hurt was too great to be ignored. She wondered if she could ever trust someone again who had hidden something so essential from her. Still, memories of her moments with William and, above all, her bond with Ethan returned to her mind like a call she could not silence. While she kept her distance, William did everything he could to get close again. He sent messages, sought her out discreetly, but respected the time she asked for. His posture was not arrogant, but filled with true remorse. The powerful businessman now seemed like an ordinary man, willing to lose everything, except the affection of Grace and his son. During this uncertain period, Ethan made an unexpected move. Feeling Grace's absence, he decided to seek her out on his own. With childlike innocence, he knocked on her door and, looking into her eyes, said firmly, "I want you to be my mommy." That phrase, so simple, was enough to disarm any resistance in Grace's heart. Grace, moved, embraced the boy tenderly. She felt the weight of the responsibility, but also the beauty of the request. It wasn't just William who wanted her nearby, but Ethan, the child who had won her heart from the very first glance. In that moment, she realized her bond with the boy was as true as her pain with William. When William learned of the meeting, he rushed to Grace's house. He found them together, his face a mixture of fear and hope. He approached slowly, as if each step were a silent plea for forgiveness. Grace, still hurt, listened in silence, but this time she did not push him away. His words this time were different. There were no elaborate justifications, only sincere confessions. William admitted he could not bear to lose them both, that he had learned from his mistakes and that he wanted to start again without masks or disguises. His voice trembled, revealing that the man used to power was finally vulnerable. And in that atmosphere of tension and emotion, destiny began to realign itself. Grace was not yet ready to give a definitive answer, but she no longer saw only the lie in him. She saw a desperate father, a remorseful man, and above all, someone willing to strip everything away to live for what truly mattered: real love. Ethan's innocent request echoed in Grace's heart like a melody impossible to ignore. As much as she tried to protect herself from the pain of being deceived, the truth was that the boy already held a deep place in her life. The memory of his pleading eyes and the simple phrase, "I want you to be my mommy," wouldn't leave her mind. Grace then decided to take a step that would change the course of the story. She agreed to meet William again, willing to hear once more what he had to say. The reunion happened in a discreet cafe, far from society's curious eyes. There, amidst the aroma of fresh coffee and the quiet broken only by distant voices, a mix of tension and hope filled the air. When William saw her arrive, he immediately stood up. His eyes, worn from days of anguish, brimmed with emotion. The imposing businessman and the disguised worker were gone. Before Grace stood only a vulnerable man, ready to fight for her and for his son. His posture revealed remorse and a sincere desire to start anew. The first words were difficult. Grace held a firm expression, still carrying the weight of the lies. But little by little, his sincerity began to show through. William spoke not of fortune, status, or excuses. He spoke of love, of regret, of a simple life he wished to build alongside her and Ethan. Ethan, seated between them, seemed to sense that this moment was special. The boy smiled, as if he knew his family was coming together before his eyes. His small gesture of holding Grace's hand and then William's, joining them in silence, became the final link to break down the remaining walls. Grace, moved, let tears fall quietly. It was not only about forgiving William, but about allowing herself to live something new without fear. She saw in the man before her not only the millionaire or the imposter, but the father who loved his son and the man who was willing to change. That realization touched her deeply. The embrace that followed was more than a physical gesture. It was a symbol of reconciliation. Grace and William held each other in silence while Ethan smiled between them, finally feeling the warmth of a family. It was a simple moment, but one that carried the weight of a promise to start again. Thus, the emotional reunion marked a new stage in their lives. Now, without masks, without secrets, and without barriers, their relationship was reborn. Challenges still lay ahead, but their bond was stronger than ever. It was only the beginning of a new story, built on truth and love. The moment of truth had arrived. William decided to officially introduce Grace to society, no longer as just an acquaintance, but as the woman he had chosen to share his life with. The setting was a grand gala event in New York, filled with businessmen, influential figures, and the elite accustomed to judging by appearances. On the night of the event, William appeared as elegant as ever in a flawless suit. At his side was Grace Miller, 32 years old, tall, black, with a radiant smile and her voluminous curly hair tied back in a high ponytail. Her simple yet sophisticated dress highlighted her natural elegance. The couple's entrance was marked by surprised looks and immediate whispers. Ethan, only 5 years old, accompanied them with a contagious smile. The boy with light skin, expressive eyes, and short brown hair walked confidently holding Grace's hand. For him, this was the moment to show the world that he finally had a complete family. His joy stood in stark contrast to the shock etched on the faces around them. The guests, used to alliances built on power and status, could not hide their astonishment. A former maid, now introduced as the fiancée of one of the most powerful men in the city, was something no one would have dared to imagine. The initial silence soon turned into murmurs of disbelief, mixed with looks of judgment. But Grace, standing tall, was not intimidated. She walked beside William with confidence, greeting those who looked at her with disdain. Her presence radiated charisma and dignity, as if she had been born for that very moment. With every gesture, she earned not only respect but also admiration from those who could recognize true greatness. William, in turn, showed unwavering pride. His eyes left no doubt. Grace's origin did not matter, only the love and values they shared. In his speech to the audience, he spoke not of business or financial achievements, but of family, courage, and the importance of seeing beyond appearances. Ethan, sitting in the front row, clapped enthusiastically. For him, there was no fortune, status, or prejudice that could overshadow what he felt. The happiness of having found in Grace the mother he had longed for. His innocence once again showed society that love is simple, even if adults insist on complicating it. Thus, on that gala night, a new chapter began for the three of them. William, Grace, and Ethan stood as a family before the incredulous eyes of the elite. The shock that struck everyone turned into a silent lesson, stronger than any fortune. It is character and heart that sustain true love. Now tell me, after hearing this story, do you still believe that money can buy what truly matters? The millionaire had power, prestige, and fortune, but he only found happiness when he decided to risk it all for love and truth. And you? What would you be willing to give up in order to live something real? If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel right now, turn on notifications, and keep learning with me about life lessons that transform. And one more thing, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how far this message has reached and share this journey with you.